Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this episode of Motor City Mobility and Manufacturing, where we are covering an interesting topic, digital transformation crossroads, bridging the national security and the commercial sector insights. We are joined by our honorary guest, Joseph Monaco. He is Director of Strategy, Senior Operations Officer, and the Digital Transformation Lead for Air Mobility Command. So buckle down and listen to this wonderful conversation with Joseph. Joseph, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, thanks, Mamber. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Honored to be here. Thank you for the invite. Up front, I just have to say I am still an active duty Air Force member, so I'm participating in this webinar in a personal status. So my comments will be more abstract and concrete. I won't talk about operations or anything like that. And my comments don't necessarily reflect the views of the 618th Air Operations Center, where I work, the Air Mobility Command, the Air Force, or the Department of Defense. I just want to talk a little bit about the 618th Air Operations Center because that's important to what we're going to talk about today. It is the largest air operations center in the Air Force. We control over 1,100 aircraft and 18,000 airmen exercising our mission. It's 24/7, 365, 100 to 150 missions per day on average. What that means is every 3.5 to 4 minutes, per day, an aircraft is taking off or departing around the globe. And we also have about 120 of our global air mobility support airmen at any one time, forward deployed at about 25 locations, supporting that mission en route. Planning, tasking, executing, and assessing our mission from a global perspective. And that should set up this conversation well in how we're digitally transforming our systems and our C2 processes. C2 means command and control. Thanks
Oh,
for the introduction.
thanks, Joseph. That's quite a lot of work that you guys execute efficiently to make sure the operations runs seamlessly. So I'll start with the first area. I think the digital transformation in the age of technology as AI and Gen AI takes a center stage. So what you see the core drivers of the digital transformation, specifically focusing on the regulated or the national security sector,
Mhm.
and then I can probably put some thoughts on the commercial that what we saw as the core drivers.
That's a great question. We are encumbered by a lot of legacy systems, which is fine. But what we found is as the technology has caught up in the commercial sector, our younger airmen through what's called the Digital Aircrew Initiative, they're seeing all these capabilities in their personal lives, right? And so that's the initial spark to make change and to digitally transform. But then at my level, at the operational level where we command and control those airmen, what we see really is a lot of scar tissue and a lot of pain points for our operators that happen with those global operations that I talked about at the start. So anything that we create or we use from a systems perspective, it has to work from the tactical edge and it has to work at the operator workstation. We have some kind of guiding principles as we digitally transform. We don't want more screens. There's no standard set of data, and there's no standard common operations picture. If I had a nickel for every time someone told me, if you just sign into my system, you'll be able to get exquisite situational awareness and everything you need. That is a fallacy for a number of reasons that we'll go into later. But then also, talking about a mission taking off every 3.5 minutes around the globe, decision making is a function of time. So anytime we have a crisis or higher tempo operations, what ends up happening is we have to make decisions with less than perfect information. I think Colin Powell said it best. Like he liked to make decisions with 30 to 70% of the information because you're never going to have much more than that to be
Mhm.
effective. So that's kind of part one of that. And he also said the key is not to make quick decisions, but timely decisions. And so what we have found from an air operations center perspective is as we go into crisis and as we go into higher tempo, our mission and our enterprise data, it can't keep up with what we're doing. So we have to fill that gap with tactical data or unstructured data, and that's really what's driving our digital transformation campaign here. So the two things I talked about are the grassroots, the digital aircrew initiative. We want to be more digital and not have to use paper and be able to talk to you in asynchronous in different ways. And then from the C2 operator side, we don't want to have more screens. We want to connect more data and fuse that data to make more timely decisions. Does that make sense?
No, it does, and I think I can relate to in a commercial sector as well that you cannot scale with the paper. You need to leverage the data you are already capturing. It becomes a liability if you don't use it. So how you can convert that data that's sitting as a liability because you're paying for it into an asset that can actually provide you insights in your decision making for the future, looking at the patterns. And the second is being agile. I like your comment having targeting for 100% information, it actually can cause a blocker for you. So, what is the right information that I need, even though it's a subset of it? And now I can use the historical patterns of a data to make decisions that can actually make me more agile and move faster rather than being stagnant and waiting for all the blocks of the Lego to fit in before I can decide. So it becomes really really important. A great insights from the challenges standpoint. I think that's where I ask in the commercial sector as well. That how do you see these regulatory and compliance constraints in the national security can impact your digital transformation journey, whether it's slowing it down, whether it is telling you that it is impacting your agility, that you can't be agile enough because you have to follow certain protocols. So any thoughts on the challenges that specifically you feel that can be revamped in the era of AI, Gen AI?
Okay. That's a great question. It's a loaded question, but it's necessary. So first of all, the regulatory constraints, they are necessary. Like we
Mhm.
need them, right? The technology is changing so fast, and from an operational security standpoint, we need to be able to kind of throttle what we're doing with that. That said, I think where we can get better on the government side is avoiding kind of the knee-jerk reactions and what happened over the last few years with open AI and large language models accelerating, and then what was happening with the compute on that and really opening up the doors for use cases. What was the government's initial response to that was you will not use LLMs for operations, right? So that's normally how this plays out, and it's not specific to artificial intelligence. But we could probably get better at from the beginning framing instead of what you can't do, what you can do with it. And so we were fortunate from where I sit. Prior to all the open AI rage, if you will, to use terms that my kids use, like it's all sudden savage and like everyone needs to use this. Prior to that, we were already on a roadmap with an academic institution that we team with to develop prototypes using these models and some hybrid models in a way that we could deploy the tech in an environment that is operationally secure. And so we were out in front of it. And so by the time the government caught up and said, hey, we have a large language model you can now use at certain DISA impact levels, we were already there. In fact, we were ready to put it into operations, which is where it is today. And so we could probably do better about knee-jerk reactions is item one. The second challenge, which is also an opportunity, is you have to acknowledge the human factor in all this change, especially on the government side. I'll just say we have some more distinguished individuals where we work. So very experienced, been doing things a certain way for 10, 20, some even 30 years. So you have to have a very humanistic approach to that change. It has to be more descriptive than prescriptive, right? So you really have to start with the why we're making the change, why this is going to help your workflow, stop hurting you, and you will stop hurting others because of this technology. So that's kind of item two, is the human factor. And then item three, the acquisitions process on the government side is very geared towards big iron, hardware, airplane type processes, which, as you know from where you sit,
Yep.
doesn't work very well with software and with these AI capabilities to layer on top of that data layer and that application layer. And so we have to be better with that and acknowledge that the actual requirement is the process, the agile methodology and development and operations pipeline. It is less of the give me all these requirements. We'll take them, hand them off to a distant program office, and they'll take those, put them in the oven and bake them, and then you'll get something in 1 or 2 years, maybe best case. Does that make sense?
100%. I think that's more of traditional waterfall mindset that somebody's going to go and come up with something, and hopefully it will work for your needs in the future. I also love your point on why we are trying to do this. I think that becomes a critical component. And on the adoption standpoint, even when we work with our customers, it all depends on what we are trying to solve. If it's sensitive, even from a commercial standpoint, like product design team, it's their IP. So you're gonna make sure that they don't use the large language models from the shelf, because again they can be used to train the algorithms, right? I think there was actually in a news somebody actually put their whole designs or IP in the OpenAI. But I think it's very very important. One is to understand what you're trying to solve, leveraging AI and analytics, and the second is what is the if you people understand that what are the potential implications or the impacts and how to safely use it. I think that becomes a critical factor in driving the adoption of this. So especially, in Gen AI, it's a disruptive technology. Every few decades, there's a disruption that happens in technology that can enhance. But it's very, very important to have those regulatory and compliance aspect covering, so it doesn't do a whole lot of damage, specifically in the sector of national security. I'll move to the speed of innovation now. I think in the commercial sector, it's all about speed now. That how the disruptive technology will define winners versus the losers, or what I can say is somebody will transform or other will become obsolete. So what is your take on that? That how innovation still being adhered to the regulatory requirements can still gain a speed and accelerate while ensuring security as well.
That's a great question, and it ties to the previous, because if you embrace the reality of the systems and the systems of systems that are out there, I think there is a critical path here. You know, I always tell my team that slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's very cliche, but it matters here because it really is slower. It doesn't just seem slower.
Mhm.
And it needs to be, because what we've done is, you have to spend more time in the military. We call this in mission analysis, when we like frame a problem. Let's look at all the facts and assumptions and constraints and restraints, and all the things that are in the doctrine, right, which is really sound theory codified in that doctrine. But by spending more time at that human change management layer, which also corresponds to the data layer. So to go faster, you actually have to go slower at first. So we spend most of our time right now with data interfaces, connecting between legacy system lakes, some that are on-prem, some that are already cloud native. And that really eats up a lot of our time. But by doing that, what we're seeing with our agile pipeline, which is user story to prototype to production, is once we have the data element connected in the right format, we can quickly put that into production. And that's not just with structured data. Again, it's with that unstructured data that we've been able to capture by changing changing the way that we communicate. Very big picture on that. We went from synchronous communications to asynchronous communications, which
Mhm.
meant that all of those conversations that were happening real time, which, oh, by the way, are less secure, are now in a unstructured data elements, and in a way that we can compute on that. And so we're able to get tons of insights from that. So by narrowing those use cases and going slower to prep the data layer, we've been able to build out user stories in a methodical way, which actually gets us from prototype to production faster. And so that's what I've seen. I've been doing this for 3 years at the Air Operations Center. Again, like a very big enterprise with a lot of tech debt and a lot of systems that don't talk to each other is kind of what I walked into.
I think, and this can resonate actually with a lot of industrial customers as well, because they carry a lot of tech debt on their side. And I think you highlight a very important point that it's more of a crawl, walk, run, putting your transformation into more of a phased approach rather than boiling the whole ocean. That okay, today I am industrial enterprise, and tomorrow I'm going to become a fully digital enterprise. So I think that goal is not even realistic. So when we talk about the speed of innovation, it's more of understanding your phased approach, and how you're going to execute a crawl, walk, run. Whereas you test out certain use cases, now you can scale those because you have validated the functionality of those aspects. So I think that's where actually the
Spot
both the
on.
sectors can share the learnings from each other. Moving to the technology implementation, I know I see a fluctuation from the internet. The weather's not that good outside, so it probably be that's a reason. But hopefully things goes along. Technology implementation. So how does the approach of adopting emerging technologies differ between these two sectors, from commercial and national security? I know we have touched a little bit before as well, but coming in the last year, the whole talking point was LLMs and RAG architecture, and in 2025, we're talking about AI agents sitting on a different applications, automating that. So, how you see the technology implementation taking a role in the national security?
So when I hear implementation, I'm thinking like you're putting it into production, and you're evaluating and iterating now that this prototype is actually interacting with the real world data set and the actual humans, in my case, controlling these thousands of missions, every year. Um, and I would push that question back to you,
Mhm.
and ask, how does the commercial sector determine when a product is working and minimally viable? And then I'll have some thoughts after you answer that.
Yeah, so generally, it depends on a engagement with a customer, and it requires some of educational support for them as well. As we meet with a customer, we try to understand what their challenge is, right? So there could be that they have the new plant from a manufacturing standpoint, and they have some smart equipment on a specific assembly line, which is already doing the work that it's supposed to do. So we can augment it further by enabling automation, where certain decisions based on certain criteria, the agents can take over. So suppose if there's a windmill, and windmill is rotating at a speed, now the agents based on that's monitoring the weather pattern, they can actually communicate to a windmill to slow down a speed. Just one use case on that side. But there are certain parameters that can be defined, but it all depends on where the customer stands on their transformation journey, or whether their current uh, technology estate is ready enough to incorporate that disruptive technology. I think it goes back to the point is why they want to do what they want to do, and doing the assessment. I think that's one of the key component we do with all of our engagements is ask the customer. Let's start with assessment. Let's understand where you stand today. You may have a perception that you are at a level 3 maturity, but when we do an assessment, you probably at level 2, or you may be at level 4 already, and it will vary plant by plant. Your plant One plant may be built in the 1970s, that probably at a level 1. Your plant built in 2000, probably at a level 4 already. So providing them the visibility of their current state, and then seeing how the technology can be implemented. I think that does drive a meaningful impact and a positive feedback from a customer.
Okay, yeah, and that rhymes a lot with what I'm seeing here on the government side too. It's all about these internal feedback loops and these external feedback loops,
Mhm.
which are part of a complex adaptive system, right? So getting back to that humanistic approach, in my mind, as the director of digital transformation for what I'm working on at the AOC, only the operator gets to say when the product is minimally viable. I
Mhm.
That's just full stop. It doesn't matter what the program office says. It doesn't matter what the middle management says, right? So, and that's going to vary, just like as you highlighted, based on function and work center, and maybe where that work center is on their journey for digital transformation. We see on the aircrew side, like early adoption of a lot of the capabilities that we are fielding through data integration, application dev, and then the
Mhm.
narrow AI, which is really just conversational AI injected in the same place that we are doing command and control. So aircrew is moving faster because they're kind of out there on the edge, and they have different pain points than, for example, home station maintenance.
Mhm.
At a main operating base, they're just now entering the movie of this because they're seeing when crews come back, and they're reading reports from exercises and operations, seeing how flat, fast, and secure comms were. And so they're like, maybe I need some of that, right? And so um, the pace will be different as you implement across the enterprise. The key is that the operator, I keep calling them the operator. You probably call them something different, but the end user is the only one that gets to check the box and stop that DevOps pipeline.
Yeah.
And so this gets to, I talked about how we have to set the data layer in the change management first. Step three of our model for digital transformation is layering on the technology. Like, we don't even consider it until we've done all this other work up front. For a couple of reasons. One, you're going to be using a fake data set that can't actually be put into production if you haven't prepped that data layer first. And two, you don't always know what the requirement is for the tech or the AI until you've done all that work to the left. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of our change model. That sounds simple in theory. In practice, it's extremely complex. It requires constant iteration with operators. It requires me, I'm a full colonel in the Air Force, to be in a lot of meetings I probably shouldn't be in. But that's just kind of how it works when things are moving as fast as they do with emerging tech.
No, I think I heard you the word operator, and that's what we try to call it in our site as well. And that's a very, very important factor. Generally, that's overlooked in a commercial that we have seen. And that's what one of our ask is actually when we engage with our customers, we always ask who is the final operator on assembly line that's doing the job, because if they spend all day doing this work, they probably have much better insights that what can actually enhance it further, rather than somebody as myself coming in and just learning, observing for a few minutes or 1 hour, or somebody even in that commercial sector's hierarchy on the top, whether supervisor or manager, who just got a final second-hand report from the operator. So it's very important to understand who's going to benefit, what is the challenge associated with that operator, whether he is doing some job that's harder, there's a lot of quality issues, and what can enhance his work that can actually remove, whether it's removing the quality issues, bringing the efficiency. So engaging the end user, operator, whatever we're going to call it, I think it's a common across all the industries to drive that adoption of that digital transformation initiative. And I think that brings me to another point, that how we can enable the talent and the culture change. One of the biggest challenge in the commercial sector, but I will start with you, that how you foresee that um, the U.S. Air Force is transforming that to filling the gap of the talent shortage in the evolving technologies, as well as a culture change that this is the new ways of working?
Yeah, it's a great question, and talent culture are very interactive. I'll say from a digital transformation perspective, you have to have that inner core of talent, the passionate, disruptive, airmen. In the case of what I'm working on here, that person has to be humble, approachable, credible. They have to have some knowledge of the processes with the developers. In our case, Scrum, right? So, but it doesn't take a village to actually digitally transform. On
Mhm.
my team, there's three of us: a captain, a lieutenant colonel, and me. We're kind of the inner core of this, and we're running the machine. But on the culture side, I think Peter Drucker said it best: the culture eats strategy for breakfast. And then, kind of linked to that theme, Hannibal Lecter said, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu."
Mhm.
So you've got to keep both of those in your cross check, because while there's other waterfall efforts happening over here to the side, and someone else has a cop that's the end all be all, you've got to be able to communicate and relate to those things, with my leadership, and then his boss, and his boss's boss, to be able to show that value and a return on investment of something that is pretty nascent, to be honest with you, when it comes to the conversational AI for tech transition effort that we
Mhm.
have. We're probably in the first of 9 innings on that, and when it comes to our use cases, that are coming from our federally funded research and development institution, to our software factory, to being put in the prod for the Air Operations Center. And so you've got to manage all of that culture, and then, as I mentioned earlier, it always cracks me up when we first started this journey, just the military or the government resistance to change. It could be overwhelming. We had individuals, some more distinguished individuals, been around for a long time, that just refused to change. And it was always ironic watching them leave our building. And what was the first thing they did when they walked out the door? They pick up their smartphone and they're communicating asynchronously, chatting with three people at once, using AI, talking to Chat GPT, whatever it is. It's like, okay, take what you just did, and consider what we're going to field within your workflow that's going to make your job 100 times easier. So those are just some thoughts. But at the end of the day, when it comes to talent and culture, humans are the magic. The airmen, in my case, are the magic. You've got to listen to them. You have to be with them. Like, we spent a lot of time out on the floor with them, iterating as we're making these changes, explaining the why, explaining the limiting factors.
Mhm.
Because what often happens is, they taste this goodness and they want like 50 things, like, well, now I want it to do all this, and you kind of have to modulate that. So just some
Exactly.
thoughts, hopefully that's helpful.
No, no, this very well correlates to the commercial sector as well. That there's a pushback that if I'm doing a thing certain way from last 3 decades or 4 decades, why should I change now? And I think that's where showing them that the reason why the change is important, how they are already interacting with a similar technology. I think you use perfect analogy that as they walk out of the building, the device probably running multiple agents in a different apps anyway. So it's essentially happening. So and then trying to that what is the losing factor. So it was interesting. We were at a customer call, and to convince them, I say, like, do you really expect to get a call in the midnight that you have to respond to, or you can use this technology to automate it? And that kind of triggers, okay, I don't want to get a call at 3 a.m. that, okay, this is down, when this can be automated, and the person over there, whether he's new, he can leverage conversational AI interface to get his answers, what you're going to provide to him. And essentially highlighting the person importance, that it is actually your information that's going in a model. So you are actually leading this change, and I think that the person feel empowered. Okay, this is taking sense of ownership, that this is the area that I'm transforming. So I think operator and explaining them why, and bringing them in part of ecosystem, that they are empowering this change, that goes a long way. um, this is a recorded session, just a question for the a point for the audience, that if you want to ask a question, you can put in the LinkedIn chat. You can reach out to Joseph after as well, or myself after, via LinkedIn. We'd be happy to answer your questions. I know we are close to the time, but I will take two quick questions. How you measure success on your side, Joseph? And when I say measure success, are there any key drivers that you foresee, whether it's adoption by the operator, whether it is efficiency, or the cost saving is one aspect, of whether it's adoption by the operator, or different factors that you consider as, okay, this is the success factor for this initiative?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a very squishy answer,
Mhm.
right? Because getting back to the acquisition process, you have key performance indicators, and then from other areas of government terminology, you have measures of effectiveness. Are we doing the right things? And then measures of performance. Are we doing the right things correctly? Right. Very tough to measure these. Depending on where you sit, you might measure it differently. It's kind of like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle in some ways.
Mhm.
But that said, it's very easy to sense and feel if you just go talk to the airmen and the operators, and you go into the prod environment and just you can sense the pain points. We have a lot of feedback channels. For we have three applications as part of the effort that I lead. Each of those has its own way of giving feedback, and often that feedback goes right back into the prototype and right into prod, sometimes within the same day.
Mhm.
And so that's key to this, because what you do there is you earn and maintain the trust of all the humans that you're trying to team with the machine, and you also show that you're credible and capable. And so I think that's key. And the other way that I measure success where I work is the digital transformation making us more of a learning organization. And it's been amazing to see that it is in the case of what we're doing at the Air Operations Center, because the digital transformation is actually changing processes and
Mhm.
workflows, and it's not eliminating the need for humans to do
Yeah.
command and control. What it's doing is making us more effective and shortening days, so one airman doesn't have to work for 18 days, or sorry, 18 hours, and then try to safely drive home and turn
Yeah.
right around and come back, right? He or she can work 8 hours, go home, and maintain the same visibility as he or she wants. So when they come back on shift, they're right back in running, right? So there's that aspect to it. Continuous learning and process improvement. Um, Again, hard to measure these things, but if you just go talk to the airmen, we have over 11,000 airmen using the end products of the digital transformation effort that I'm leading. So I'm constantly talking to airmen, sensing, watching feedback channels, making sense of what's actually going on, and then pulling that back into our DevOps pipeline as needed.
No, I think that's it's very much resonate with the commercial sector as well. Something that we highlight is that digital transformation is a continuous journey. The day you think that you are done with it, you become stagnant. So it's an innovative mindset. It's a continuous learning that needs to be embedded in an organization's culture. And I think you highlight a very important point. The technology is just there to augment the work. The humans will be there in the loop. And I always use one example everywhere. Look at the aviation, evolution. Having the navigator in a cockpit along with pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer. Then over the time, the evolution of the computers and the flight engineer role transformed. Probably they became pilots, and then now certain entities are testing a single pilot cockpit. But again, the demand has outgrown that much that there's an opportunity to learn new skills and fill the gaps, because even the pilots are needed everywhere, right? So, or
Mhm.
different roles that they can
Mhm.
fulfill.
That's a great
So
example.
yeah, so it's always not there to replace. It's just helped you augment your work, so you don't spend too much time on redundant activities. Instead, you think about how can I make a difference in optimizing the my processes further, uh, leading to a continuous learning journey and the transformation. Joseph, I know we are over time. Really appreciate your time and the great work that you do. And thank you for your service, by the way.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
yeah,
If I may, can I put in a quick plug for the ACP?
Mhm, please, please.
So for those of you watching, the whole reason why this is happening is because I've teamed with member in American Corporate Partners Mentoring Program. So I just want to put a plug in for that for the transitioning service members that are out there. I highly recommend that program. And then for the folks in the commercial industry, this is something that I would definitely consider if you haven't already. Whether you're with a Fortune 500 company or not, this is something that we need as we transition out of the service. I've been in the Air Force 24 years. By the end of the year, I'll be doing something different. So this has just been amazing, and I thank you for your time this morning and the opportunity to share some insights, although very abstract because of my role. Again, this is me talking from a personal perspective. I'm not talking on behalf of the U.S. Air Force, but
Yeah.
thank you for letting me do that.
No, no, no. You're welcome. I think together we learn from each other. I think that's a mindset, regardless, right? So we learn and we evolve, and the learnings we can take from each of the industries and make a difference in our work environments. So really appreciate Joseph. Audience, if you're listening after it's live, feel free to reach out to on our LinkedIn, or we can happy to answer any of your questions. Again, thanks very much, Joseph. Take care.
Thanks all. Yep.